Are the Soviets psychic? That's our topic question for today.
It's Bill Barker's Hot Topic, the panel show that confronts problems of first importance to us all. Now, here's Bill to introduce his guests.
You know, sometimes in this country, one has to smile a bit about how we're driven to do things like land the men on the moon for the first time. And those who are fair-minded would say, looking at the history of this, we were driven to do this because the Russians put together something called Sputnik, and we were sure we were in a race for the moon. Well, now, there are other things that we have ignored pretty much in this country simply because they didn't seem to fit into our hard-headed, materialistic point of view on things. And this includes the whole area of parapsychology. Well, it's been discovered that the Soviets are working very hard in this realm and are quite skilled at things having to do with extrasensory perception and allied topics. And we have with us some guests today who have gone into this in some degree. And it may be that this has caused them to write a book which will influence our own government to make tremendous emphasis in that direction. Maybe we're in another, if you will, kind of psychic Sputnik area. First of all, let me introduce to you Sheila Ostrander. Sheila is the author of several books, articles, and plays, and is co-author with Lynn Schroeder of the newly published Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. And here beside me is Lynn Schroeder, the co-author, who has also written extensively and on the Soviet Union to boot, and has credits which include articles and a book and some poetry. Across the table from Lynn is someone that everyone in these parts knows quite well, Dr. Jule Eisenbud. And Jule is the Denver psychiatrist who has had a long-standing interest in parapsychology and is author of the controversial, best-selling The World of Ted Serios. We're going to be talking about what the Soviets are up to, what's going on behind the Iron Curtain in psychic discovery and research, right after you look at this.
The now generation is not an age group, but rather it's an adventure of the mind, which can take you on a tour of a haunted house or introduce you to the touring sport of antique automobiles. It'll open the world of the colorful history of Colorado through museums, arts, architecture, and music. So join the now generation with me, Greg Oswald, this Sunday on Now 4.
I'm Lester Stoddard. I'm 27 years old. I am an epileptic under control by doctor and medication. I am looking for sales work. I have had experience in drugstores, electronic stores, and over-the-counter sales, especially.
Mr. Employer, Lester Stoddard is looking for a sales job. If you have a job for him, call Jobline 222-1551. Please call during business hours.
Sheila Ostrander, you two gals, as I understand it, went to Russia in the summer of '68. Mm-hmm. And specifically, did you have in mind this study of what the Soviets were up to in this field?
Oh, yes, we certainly did. We've been doing articles about the Soviet Union for some time, and in the course of looking at Soviet publications, we noticed they were writing a tremendous amount about telepathy and related phenomena, which we call ESP, and also about the fact that there were tremendous potentials that human beings possessed that they had scarcely begun to tap. So we thought, well, maybe there's an article on this, and we wrote the scientists, and they wrote back, they sent cables. We were really surprised at this response. I guess nobody had ever asked them before.
You found them cooperative?
Very cooperative, and so in about 1968, they invited us to attend an international conference on parapsychology held in Moscow in June of '68.
Well, Lynn, did you have any background interest in this yourself?
Yes, we hadn't really written about it before, but we've been members of the American Society for Psychical Research, and we tried to keep up with the field in the West. It was sort of our avocation, hobby of some sort in a way. And then when we decided to go to Russia, of course, we did contact more people here to get their opinions of the Russian work before we went to see what was going on in American labs. So we did know something.
The first area, I should say, of interest in this always, I'm sure, with the Americans is ESP a potential weapon of war? We've heard that one, haven't we, Jule?
All the time.
And is it your opinion it might be?
It causes wars. That's about all.
ESP does?
Well, there's a perpetual war about whether it's real or not. Scientific war. I mean, there always has been. The war's been going on since the Stone Age, I should say. I don't, myself, after playing around with it for 25 years or so, I don't see it as a potential weapon that can be controlled at all. Although I would presume that this is one ground of the Soviet interest in it.
Would it be a principal motivating area of interest for them?
It appears to be. Apparently it's the military and the secret police who are funding a tremendous amount of this research, and their idea is to use telepathy as a communication system which couldn't be picked up, you see, by other means, and it might be possible then to use it for space communication, for espionage, for submarines and so forth. And they've done a considerable amount of research in this, using it at the basis of a primary perception communication, that is among animals. For instance, one of the interesting tests they did involved communication among rabbits. They placed baby rabbits on board a submarine. The submarine submerged about a mile beneath the ocean. The mother rabbit was kept back in the lab and electrodes planted deep in her brain. Then aboard the submarine, scientists killed the baby rabbits one by one, and at the moment the baby rabbits died, the mother rabbit registered a drastic change in brain activity. So obviously the rabbit wouldn't have had any understanding of the test, and it seemed that there was communication.
Now, the mother rabbit was on land, huh?
Right, in a lab on land. And at the time her babies died, she seemed to react.
I'm sure that any members of our own military who are watching this are thinking, wow, send an order by mental telepathy, huh? Kind of thing.
We just did that with plants in Denver.
Right, that's right.
With daughter plants taking off the mother plant, and we had this electronically rigged to record. It didn't work. Of course, we're chicken. We couldn't go up the scale to rabbits.
Yeah.
And we felt badly about the plants, I must say.
Kind-hearted.
We just did this here in Denver.
Yeah.
We're not through. We're going to repeat it.
So this would be the principal thing as you see it, Lynn. The possible warfare use would be to telepathize. Is that the word?
There are other areas of mind control, which I think they're into. Dr. Leonid Vasiliev, who really was a world-famous physiologist, holder of the Lenin Prize, and probably was the man who founded parapsychology in the Soviet Union, did quite a bit of work during the Stalin years, which he did not reveal until the end of the 50s, of telepathic hypnosis, which is the ability to knock somebody out or throw them into a trance at a distance. And they've done this thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Now, they're still doing it in the labs in Russia, and they're also attempting, as they put you into trance from a distance hypnotically, to control your movements, to see if you will slump asleep to the left or the right, if they can guide you about a room. Now, this probably has some sort of mind control potential.
Doesn't this demand the cooperation of the subject?
Not at all. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Because you've done some.
Tell us about the work
Yeah,
you
I've
did.
done some of this, and unless you talk about unconscious cooperation, you see, it's sheer rape. There's no question about it. And Vasiliev's work is of first order. There's no doubt about it. He did it. The beauty of it is that he did it under very controlled, rigorously controlled conditions, and his greatest distance, I believe, was 1,700 kilometers between Sevastopol and Leningrad. And
which is quite a distance. A kilometer,
Yeah,
as I seem to remember,
well,
that's about a mile.
That's about 1,500 miles.
Yeah,
1,200
right.
Yeah,
miles.
it's over 1,000.
Yeah.
This has been done. There was a rash of it in France, done by French physiologists in the 1880s. There was a rash of reports on this, quite good, not as well instrumented as Vasiliev's, and then it dropped out. I tried this about 20-some years ago, got positive results, was absolutely scared out of my wits and dropped it. Never went back to it.
At what distance were you working, Jule?
I think the greatest was from New York to New Jersey, and New York to Connecticut. I'd say, oh no. And then I had one 90 miles with quite positive results.
Were you able to control emotions of the person?
No. These were preliminary experiments. But I found that this is well known. It was done at Annapolis. It was done by a gym coach there. It was done at other places.
At the Naval Academy?
It wasn't official. This is the scuttlebutt. Yeah. But later I tried to get others to do this sort of thing, and it's very hard to get people to even to try it. But when you get positive results, it's very frightening.
This is so wild. I'm sure most viewers and listeners are saying, well, wow, they're way down the road here. I mean, I just sort of barely accept hypnosis kind of thing. And everybody is familiar with the old shibboleth that you can't hypnotize someone against his will.
No,
this is not so, right?
Well, the question is, what is a person's will, and how does it manifest itself? It's exactly the same as in a seduction situation. I mean, if the lady yields, is she willing or not? Exactly. I mean, is it rape or not?
Yeah, but here we're talking about working with somebody at a distance, presumably who's not cooperating, at least not...
Bill, the whole point, the whole usefulness of this work, once it's established, once its reality is established, is how much of this goes on in the affairs of everyday life without our being aware of it. And this, of course, brings us right back to Stone Age witchcraft.
Yeah, voodoo, almost, is what it sounds like.
And the question is, what do we become ill of? Why do we do stupid things and self-destructive things?
I always thought it was just because we were stupid.
Well,
maybe someone else. Maybe many influences operating.
This is a very disturbing thing to introduce.
Yes, we have a photograph of a man who's in this state, who's being controlled at a distance in a lab situation. If we can get that.
Would you like to have it?
All right.
Probably can do a better job than
Which camera would be the better one? Can you get it there?
That's in a Bulgarian lab. They have quite a large institute of parapsychology and suggestology in Sofia, run by Dr. Georgi Lazanov. And that man is being guided at a distance telepathically. I think it's at a distance of about 3 or 4 rooms. This was done in the middle 60s. And a man who was observing this was a Dr. Milan Rizal from Czechoslovakia, who about 2 years ago defected to the United States.
He was here on your show, Bill.
Was he on your show?
Yeah.
Last year.
Oh, he was taking part in that experiment.
And he observed that experiment.
And he had mentioned that the Soviets he thought, were using this for mind control or behavior control, really.
So this is hypnosis then at a distance. What else are our friends, the Russians, doing in this field? There's so much in this book of yours, Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. Tell us another one.
Aside from the telepathic hypnosis, some of the other areas that they have pioneered include dowsing. They've also explored eyeless sight, the ability to sense color with the skin. They've investigated telepathy using coded systems and using the electroencephalograph to chart the arrival of a telepathic message in the brain. And this apparently has not been done before. They feel that it's now possible to monitor somebody who's receiving telepathy, and whether or not they're conscious of receiving a message, they can chart the change of brainwave activity and in this way decode a message. So the person would be used almost, as a component in a system.
The electroencephalograph is the customary device.
Yeah, to register brainwave activity.
You mentioned so many things as you went by there. It's a tremendous list. Now, I may say this name wrong. Rose Kuleshova? Kulyashova.
Yeah.
She's the one, didn't we read about her several years ago, who, blindfold, is it?
Yes.
Can feel a picture and tell what colors are in it where. Is that right?
Yes, she can also tell patterns. She can feel a photograph. She was very widely tested. But since then, it's almost more interesting. The Soviets have this idea that all these powers should be used. and that if one person can do it, probably an awful lot of other people could learn how to do it. So they've trained, they say anyway, they've trained quite a few people at the pedagogical institutes in Sverdlovsk, which is the Ural mountain area of Russia, to sense color with their hands. They found, according to their reports, 1 out of 6 people can learn this. It's merely a matter of developing the sense. Red supposedly feels very sticky.
Like blood?
Yeah, maybe. It's interesting when you think about color.
A sense of
It's rather chilling.
Yeah, it makes you wonder. They've also, they say, and they have a lot of scientific papers out on this, been able to have people sense color at a distance, at a barrier, say 2 or 3 to 4 inches above the thing. Some of these colors have been under glass, some of them have been under copper plates. It's part of the Russian thrust, too, of looking for an energy. They seem to think there may be an energy associated with psychic things, and if there is, they want to find it.
Well, Jule Eisenbud, being one of our guys, local fellows, the fellow we really trust,
guys.
you see.
Yeah.
Jule, what about this color sensing?
I don't know. There was some work done on it in this country, and it was inconclusive. And nobody was too happy about it.
Have you found anybody who could do it?
No. People just don't come up to you, Bill, on the street and say, look, I can sense color. Although, to tell you the truth, now that I think of it, yes, I had someone who consulted me privately. But because of that, I never investigated it scientifically.
This was a patient.
Well, yes. And but the work that's been done in this country is very meager. I must say that the Russians are going at it with a thrust that is simply, depending on how you look at it, either praiseworthy or alarming. Now, we've done sporadic electroencephalographic work, too. I recall some 20-some years ago, a neurologist in New York who thought he could detect the make and break of signals electroencephalographically. And they're working on this now. There are in this country at least 20 different labs working on algorithms and telepathy and control and so on. And this is a very promising field. But I must say that getting back to your book and the enormous amount of information you have there on what the Russians are doing and well put, beautifully put information.
Thank you.
And very exciting it is, I must say. The Russians have been doing this on and off, secretly and openly, ever since Bechterev, as a matter of fact. He preceded
Lynn Schroeder made the remark a bit earlier that was gee whizzy to me, and that is that the Russians seem to be able to train up people to do this color sensing. Visualize the person being unable to see and being able to put his hand over a picture or a color or a pattern and tell you what color that thing is. One in 6 can do this. Huh?
That's what they found. They had their most trouble with blind adults who I think had probably developed the sense of touch to such a great degree that it was difficult. But with blind children, they were doing quite well. And these were done, people say, well, maybe they were cheating or peeking or something, but the best tests were done with people who were stone blind, or in one case, a boy who'd had an accident, both eyes were removed, so he really couldn't have cheated, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. This brings up a question that I'm most often asked about our friend Dr. Jule Eisenbud and the famed Ted Serios case. Ted Serios, as I think most of you realize, is a man who's able to implant a mental image on camera film at some distance. It comes from his mind and goes on the film. And his wonderful book, The World of Ted Serios, has some beautiful displays of this. The most frequently asked question on this subject, Jule, I'm sure, is if Ted Serios can do this, must there not be many other people who can do this? And if so, have any of them shown up?
Yes, they have.
You have some other people who can do this?
Yes, we do. And we are not, at the moment, ready to have any publicity about this. But getting back to Russia, they tell me that in Russia, Kulagina can do it, who has this other name you gave a little while ago, Nelly, Nelia, or something like that.
Yes, her pseudonym.
Now, your mentor in Russia, or one of your mentors, Naumov, wrote me that Kulagina can do it, and they suspect others can do it. They're not getting the results that Ted has got, but they're getting foggings, E's, O's,
geometric
X's,
diagrams.
all you need is one good line that wasn't there before, and that you can't explain, and can't be achieved by controlled shots.
What's the word for this? For with my mind, I influence something physical at a distance. Is that called psychokinesis?
Yeah,
is that
or
what we're talking about?
telekinesis, or either called psychokinesis, telekinesis, or fraud. There are three names for it.
Sheila and Lynn have some film which I think shows us psychokinesis, and we're going to take a look at this together after you've taken a look at this message. And I think a little discussion of what that's all about would be just great, Sheila.
Well, for about the past 6 years, a woman called Nelia Mikhailova, who lives in Leningrad, has been the focus of high-level political, scientific, and military interest. And this was really not known at all in the West until just very recently. And it turned out that some of the foremost scientists in the Soviet Union had investigated her. She'd been tested by Nobel Prize winners and investigated for years by Dr. Leonid Vasilyev, whom we mentioned before, is a very famous physiologist. And they found that she is able to cause objects at a distance to move, and that she could cause non-magnetic substances to move. And she'd move such things as an egg suspended in a saline solution at a distance of 6 feet. She separated the yolk from the white of the egg. She could move large crystal bowls, all sorts of things, even bread, all types of substances. And there seemed to be no fraudulent means by which she was doing
What kind of a person is she? Is she an educated person? Is she psychic in other ways?
She seems to have all-round psychic ability, but from what we could gather, she's not a highly educated person. Actually, as a child, she was swept up in the siege of Leningrad, and at about age 14, she had to go out on the front lines to defend the city, and she was put out in a tank. In fact, all of her family had to go out and fight in the siege, which lasted almost 3 years. And she was wounded at that time, and it's possible that it's partly due to the war injury that this ability developed. However, the scientists have tested her in labs under fantastically well-controlled conditions, and she apparently is able to do this. And we have a film that shows a simple demonstration of this kind of phenomenon, which takes place in her own home. And before the film was made, it's made by Soviet scientists. She was completely examined by doctors. She was X-rayed. There was nothing concealed on her person. And the scientists who have examined her, and they include people from the satellite countries as well, say that she has never been caught in any type of fraud.
Now, what are we going to see on this film? I think sometimes we ought to tell people what we're going to see before we see it. What will we be seeing?
Well, you'll be seeing Mrs. Mikhailova causing various non-magnetic substances to move about on a table.
All right.
All right.
Let's take a look at that, shall we? You want to talk about
All right.
this?
She begins by revving up, by attempting to turn the needle of a compass. This process may take as much as 20 minutes to 2 hours before she's able to consciously focus this energy and cause the needle to move. And once she's able to do that, she apparently can move any object.
Now a skeptic would say somebody with a magnet underneath the table could cause that phenomenon.
Yes, but this has all been checked out, you see, before this film was made, and there are all kinds of scientists in the room. Here are some of the objects. They include a vertical cigarette, a wooden matchbox, a silver salt shaker, and there's a cigar case. Now, they placed a plexiglass cube over the object just to prevent drafts of air or threads or wires being used. And
it's sort of a glass jar over the thing.
Yeah, a plexiglass. And here she's able to focus her ability to cause objects to move to the point of being able to select specific matches out of an entire group and cause them to move either toward her or away from her. And in this sequence, she causes the entire batch to fall right off the table.
I think an interesting point about this is that's the way everybody's had to watch PK through the ages whenever it happened. But what the Soviets have done in their labs, and unfortunately we don't have the films, they've sort of wired her all up like an astronaut, and they check her brain waves, her heart, her respiration, and probably most importantly the force fields around her body for 12 feet. And they found that when the object begins to move, all these physical processes are drastically speeded up, and the force fields fluctuate. It all seems to fluctuate in rhythm, which is sort of looking at it from the inside instead of the outside.
Jule, what would you make of the use of the hands? Are the hands actually having any effect there?
No, I don't think it's necessary. We have, this is her mythology, as it were.
Yeah.
You see, and it's part of, I should say, almost an almost universal mythology that we do things by this kind of hocus pocus.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it may be that there has been some work, as you know, on the Swedish work on emanations from the fingers. It's conceivable. But the greatest physical psychic, like D.D. Hume of England, whom I wish the Russians had today, or I wish even we had, who was practically able to produce an earthquake in the room that he was in, was very passive and very calm a good deal of the time, didn't exert himself, and nor did Palladino to any great extent.
Yes.
And others I have read about. I have now, for instance, in the area of psychic photography, which is in a psychokinesis of a sort, without any question. Yes. Ted, as you know, went through great contortions and gyrations and knocked himself out. Others do not. It's just
Ted also feels that he needs this little, what he calls a gizmo to stare through.
Gizmo and
a little piece of rolled cardboard about so long.
Yeah, others do not. And others are very passive about the whole thing, as others have been in the history of psychic photography. So this differs. Now, I think it's important to state also that explanations, or what data scientists find, also differ depending on the preconceptions of the scientists.
What they're looking for.
What they're looking for. You see, now, you probably know the work that was done on the Gallagher circle by the engineer Crawford. You see, now, he knew nothing about force fields, although it was right in the middle of Clark Maxwell's era. But he was a mechanically minded fellow. And he got data which explained everything in terms of hidden cantilevered forces and stuff like this. So
depends on which part of the elephant you're interested in.
That's right. Yeah. Your data seem to follow. Now, my data on Ted, incidentally, which I think are very reliable as far as our tests on the beta and alpha, beta and gamma radiation fields and so on, show absolutely nothing. The electroencephalogram shows absolutely nothing, while he was getting the most perfect pictures. You see, now this is my preconception, and it's as you desire me, and this is one of the most baffling aspects of the whole field.
Yeah, that's why things aren't duplicated very often.
That's right.
In different places.
Yeah, most people don't desire me at all, that sort of thing.
Lynn Schroeder, you and Sheila Ostrander, in your book, Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain, touch on many, many subjects, one of which is called artificial reincarnation.
Now, that is the Russians' term, not ours. What they're talking about here is a method of teaching or of learning, hopefully, and not mind control. They put their subjects into a state of very deep hypnosis, and then they sort of artificially insert another personality. And they started this off with students who were really in the sciences, and they decided to teach them to draw. So they would insert Raphael, Rembrandt, or Repin, who was a Soviet or Russian, really, artist.
Insert by what method? By saying, you are Raphael, you are Rembrandt?
They seem to, you know, they work for about an hour with them and get them to believe that they are actually the person. If you went in and spoke to them, supposedly, they would say, in Raphael, it's 1505, and no, I've never seen a camera. Then they're told to paint. We have a picture here of some of the things that they did. I guess the first picture over there, I think, was after 1 or 2 sessions in this. These next 2 pictures were done after 17 and 21 sessions.
This over here was the first.
No, the other direction.
Yes, that's right.
That's the first.
I always get the sides wrong. Right, and then they had few more sessions in artificial reincarnation as Raphael and as Rembrandt. Now, they don't learn to paint like Raphael and Rembrandt, but they do get technique. It's a method of speeding up learning and sort of loosing creativity. The final picture was taken when the girl who was doing this was conscious, and they say the ability stabilizes in the consciousness.
This one?
Yeah, and then you're able to use this ability. Also, they claim
Question,
a breakthrough.
a very natural and obvious one. Did this person display any artistic talents prior to the hypnotic session? Were they handpicked because
Apparently not.
And that she was not interested in art.
And no ability.
They say, it's a curious thing here, that they have a new form of hypnosis. They say this is not passive hypnosis, it's active hypnosis. That after the hypnotist makes you into Raphael, you're really on your own. They reincarnated, I think, Queen Elizabeth I in somebody, and she began ordering the hypnotist around and decided to hold a ball, this kind of stuff. So, they use it in psychotherapy, too, for alcoholism.
Of course, this would depend a tremendous lot on the backgrounding of the subject.
Yes.
If the subject knew Rembrandt's work, presumably the work done by the subject would look more like that of Rembrandt, obviously. Huh?
Well, they know Repin's work, I know, and he's marvelous.
How do they feel about reincarnation itself?
Well, that's not something the Soviets go into, certainly not publicly. However, privately, various people throughout the communist world have suggested that possibly this is an explanation for some of the phenomena they've encountered. For instance, in Bulgaria, there's a psychic who predicts the future, and since Bulgaria is a very small country of 8 million, her predictions have affected almost every family in the country in some way, and it's caused a great many people to start asking some very profound questions about the nature of human life.
Of course, being a reincarnation buff, you know, I've got to come on strong for that particular one.
May I say here that
yes.
I was there in 1963, and I was surprised at the number of people who insisted on this as a distinct scientific possibility. And when I said, "Are you sure you know what you're talking about? You know, this
translation.
Do you mean the mind?" They said, "No, we mean the soul."
Yes,
soul is a word
they use the word soul.
time.
You know.
Do the Russians use the word soul?
All the time.
Absolutely. I was just flabbergasted to
Isn't that
find how many
dangerously
people knew
religious of them?
Vasiliev's work.
I don't know.
It's a part of mystic Russia. It's still alive and palpitating underneath.
Yeah. They worry about their souls all the time.
All the
They
time.
talk
They
about
concern. If they drink vodka, they talk about their soul. You know.
It's good for the soul.
I'm glad they're worried about that.
Have you got tired soul? That sort of
If we
thing.
can only get them hooked on capitalism, we won't have to worry about them at all. You also talk about Czech pyramids that mummify meat and sharpen razor blades. What's that all about?
Well, we have a little joke that our book is worth its weight in razor blades, and I'm not sure it is, but we went to visit quite a few Czech scientists in their homes, and we began to see these little cardboard pyramids sitting around, and so finally we looked underneath and we saw a wooden matchbox with razor blades on top. So we had to ask, and we did, and they laughed. Apparently this is something discovered by a Frenchman 40 or 50 years ago who went to the Cheops pyramids in Egypt and noticed there were a bunch of cats that had wandered in there and died. And instead of rotting away, they had mummified. So he went back to Paris and built scale models of the pyramids and found that animal tissue, cats, fish, sheep's brains, all sorts of lovely things, mummified when put in the pyramid at the height, the scale height of the king's chamber, or the pharaoh's chamber. Now the Czechs are into this because, like all the rest of the communists, they're looking for an energy. And so they have patented this razor blade sharpener in Czechoslovakia. They sell it on the market. They also sell it in Russia. It's very hard to get razor blades in these countries.
I got left someplace down the road there. We were preserving meat one minute, and now we're sharpening razor blades.
Yes, it apparently does all these various functions.
Do you have a picture of one of these pyramid things?
There's one in the book, but it's a scale
there's a
model.
diagram.
We tell how to make one if you care to make one.
How big is this pyramid?
Well, it's about 8 or 9 inches high. We have all the dimensions
and, it's a
and how to do it in the book.
Four-sided.
The four-sided
like
pyramid. Exactly, the Cheops pyramid.
You want to mummify something large. There are other dimensions in the book.
Yeah.
Well, what is the procedure?
Well,
suppose I want to preserve some meat there.
Well, we give the dimension according to the amount of meat you wish to mummify. I mean, this may be bird's eye for food preservation, but then you construct a pyramid according to the amount of the substance you wish to mummify. And of course, it will take a different amount of time depending on the quantity. But that's all there is to it. You just place the substance at the level of a third of the way up. And of course, people have been speculating about the pyramid.
Is there any kind of incantation or
no,
service held over the pyramid?
It has to be oriented exactly on the north-south axis.
They say it's the shape of the structure they feel allows some sort of energy flow to affect this, which makes you wonder about the pyramids in Egypt, where they sort of cookers that they stuck the pharaohs into, they were mummified, and then took them out again, because they've never found a pharaoh in a pyramid.
You give
we give all
recipe,
the dimensions.
Yes, in case you'd like to mummify on your own at home.
That's got to be the wildest thing that's outside of a cookbook so far. Now, what about where does the sharpening of razor blades come into in the pyramid picture?
Well, it's done the same way. You place the razor blade again on the north-south axis on top of a matchbox or any little thing that would be about a third of the height, about, I guess 2 inches high or so. And that's all there is to it. Actually, you should use a razor blade that you've gotten a fresh razor blade. You use it a few times and then you put it in. And then in about 4 days, it should be ready. And then from then on, you can keep using it. And they say they've gotten 200 shaves or more out of the same razor blade. You can use it for the whole year.
Regular blue
Gillette
blades
and Sheik are going to buy up all of the pyramids.
We were thinking of that.
Have you tried this yourself?
Yes, we tried it. Of course, the minute we got home, we built these pyramids, and we had all our friends building pyramids, and they all found that it seemed to improve the blade.
Not with a super stainless.
Not the platinum and all the special blades, but the old-fashioned type.
Use a cheap blade.
Yeah.
You don't think here that this is in the area of suggestibility rather than physical fact?
Well,
Now,
I mean...
they don't think so.
Have the blades gone to the Russian Bureau of Standards for testing or something like that?
We couldn't figure out a controlled test. That was what we did this very
our own personal test is not a scientific
There
one.
was a curious thing, though, is that they've been doing quite a bit of work trying to catch cosmic radiation going through the pyramids to see if they could find treasure rooms. They've been down there for about a year. Dr. Gohead, who's an Egyptian, they had all the latest IBM computers trucked in, and he finally
millions on
said to the London Times that he didn't know what was wrong, but they were getting different tapes every day, and they're not supposed to, and that some form of energy was at work in the pyramids, and he didn't know what it was. So
it interfered with all the
hooked up with this
IBM.
a little
Curse
bit.
of Tutankhamun.
Yeah, that's
it was an interesting idea. The Czechs are doing a lot of work trying to find this energy. It goes back into the old Reichenbach Reich.
Yeah.
It's that group.
Well, I'm
How
proud
much
to
money?
say that nobody in America is doing work on razor blades.
This is just something to lead us down the garden path and put
Or
a big
mummies.
industry.
mummies,
Put a big industry out
These
of
are
it.
the contradictions in the Russians' mind and character.
Yes,
Right.
they're paradoxical people. They are just
They are.
amazing.
This idea, almost, we were talking before about the mystical Russia. The religious impulse has gone into this. We met all sorts of sober scientists who were telling us about space civilizations, and if things got too bad here, we would be saved. They would come like loving parents from the sky. And these were academicians, and they write articles on this sort of thing. So,
Now, these are the same
interesting.
people who are the most sophisticated people in physics, mathematics, biophysics, astrophysics,
Right.
who write on different levels and really Nobel Prize winners, as you say.
Well, doesn't this make them, Jule Eisenbud, a little suspect in your mind? Aren't they inclined to be too romantic in a,
Not a
in a
bit.
science fiction way?
No. I'm glad you brought in science fiction because many, if not most, top-level American scientists are science fiction addicts. And they simply compartmentalize, dissociate their interest in one, their interest in the other. Although they now have a journal, I understand, in which they can get rid of wild ideas, just weirdos. But you see, it's been easier all along for Russians to say, okay, now I'll tighten up and be a scientist. But basically, I think, I feel this way. And actually, Bill, the test of the value of this kind of non-compartmentalization is the creativity of it.
Yes, you're so right. It releases.
Look at the area they cover in their research.
Yes.
Yeah.
Look at the training of Raphaels and Rembrandts. right or wrong, they're doing something here that's enormous. And from the standpoint of educating the human individual.
We were laughing about it a little bit earlier, particularly with the pyramid thing, and I'm sure the viewers were laughing along with us. We have this kind of, this version of materialistic thought in this country, or anything that isn't in the hard and fast 5 senses or 6 senses or whatever we say area, is to us suspect and probably buffoonery of some kind. Now, they're not so
They're not
limited
so
in their
cynical.
They're less materialist than we are in a strange way.
It just amazed me when I first found out about Vasilyev and his work.
Yes.
That they were able to tolerate these ideas at all, being, after all, brought up in dialectic materialism. But they're not, it's no contradiction to them. Firstly, their attitude is, we shall follow the facts wherever they lead. Now, secretly, they hope to find some sort of a materialistic basis, at least in the sense of force field.
Or laws,
but you know,
by which
they have footnotes which indicate that they're prepared not to meet these things.
Yes, they do.
You see? And
I would even suggest that from what you all have said, that by the very nature of this oppressive form of government, they are led to find such avenues of free escape as they may.
Okay.
Any good?
Concur.
It's possible, yeah.
Very good. More after you take a look at this.
Go.
Well, now, I understand that this book of yours, the first edition sold out immediately. Is that so?
Yeah,
Yes, it's gone through several editions before publication date, so it seems to be taking off.
How long did you two work on this?
Well, we'd corresponded with the scientists for a couple of years and then spent a year there, so it added up to several years anyway that we worked on the book.
There was a lot of translation. I think John Gunther once pointed out that nobody would have been at all surprised about Sputnik if they'd been reading Soviet publications, because it was all there, but it wasn't translated. And it seems to be a gap in, outer space, inner space. It's like another gap.
We found the same thing here, that people in the West are simply not aware of the work the Russians are doing, and it may just be this translation gap.
Well, come back to something I said at the beginning of the show. Sputnik caused us to get into the space race. And then we found out latterly that the Russians weren't all that interested in getting to the moon, but we got there, and really we owe them that in a sort of negative way. Have you had any reaction from people in our own government of interest occasioned by your book showing what they're doing behind the Iron Curtain?
Yes, we have had some scientists coming to us, more sort of off the record, but asking for information. Some people at NASA who do this, again, I don't think officially, but are very interested in this. There was one...
But nothing from the military?
Not officially, no. We've always been trying to find out what the U.S. is doing, and one hopes they're doing something, but nobody's ever admitting it officially. There is one kind of breakthrough the Soviets made that seems to be interesting most of the scientists here. It's called Kirlian photography, and as you know,
what?
Kirlian photography.
Kirlian?
It's named after a husband-wife team.
Discoverer.
You probably know, and your viewers do too, that psychics have always said they could see an aura around the human body, and that from this colored light surround, they could tell something about
I always thought that
health.
was a terribly phony thing.
Well,
it's always been
you light up with like neon all around yourself, and only certain people can see this, right?
Well, the Soviets have a way of photographing the aura, which means everybody could see it. We have one here, which is... This is considered a biological breakthrough, by the way.
Aura.
That's a human finger, tremendously magnified.
Magnification of the human finger, and see the radiation
from the edge of the skin shows some of this energy which is pouring from the skin.
Looks like a brush fire.
Yes. Now it's in brilliant colors, almost like a psychedelic light show. And according to the colors and the locations of the flares and so on, they've been able to diagnose internal conditions, the state of your mind, your health, your mood, and so forth. We have some pictures there that show the finger again.
Also the finger.
And one of them shows the finger of a normal, healthy person. The one on the, let's see, will be
the one with more light coming out.
This one? Yeah. Which is the healthy one?
That's the healthy one.
The one I'm pointing to?
Right.
Yes.
And the person, and the one on the other side is the same person, but in a state of great fatigue. And in that condition, he's losing a great deal more energy. And we have another one showing the human chest. And this again shows these flares coming from specific locations on the human body. That's the human chest. And it's, again, brilliant in color, brilliant blue and gold and fiery violet.
One of the things the Soviets have done with this, they've developed a whole new idea in biology at the University of Kazakhstan, which is out near the space centers. They call this bioplasma, and I don't think that is accepted over here yet. We have plasma in physics, but we don't have bioplasma. And they're developing a whole new concept of diagnosing diseases, attempting, well, they say you can tell ahead of time when someone is going to get a disease, particularly tumors, before you could tell it with any known physical test.
Yes, there's a disturbance of the pattern on the color of the energy long before this illness could be detected in the human body by any other means. And of course this applies to plants as well. If a plant has been contaminated in some way by a plant disease, this will show up in the energy pattern coming from
Now,
the
is this
plant.
detected by color photography always? Is this the device?
It can be done in color. It can be. There are optical devices, sort of like a fluoroscope, where you can watch the thing in motion. And they've worked with the electron microscope and all types of the latest scientific
It's very
equipment.
well documented. It's probably the best documented
Yes, they've
thing
worked
we
on
have.
this for something like 30 years, and they have an incredible range of research, which they've
Does it
accomplished.
call for special devices that we do not have?
Well, so far as we were able to determine from scientists here, we do not have this photographic equipment here.
But we could do it.
But we could do it. We
hoping
could
to get somebody to do it for us.
construct this.
Have you two seen this stuff in action?
Well, we've got the equipment, and we're having biophysicists work on it right now. Some very famous people from well-known institutes.
You
but
have
again,
your own equipment. Did you get it in Russia?
we can build it. But the point is that this here has to be done clandestinely. These people are afraid if word gets out. And over in Russia, it's just an average area of scientific research. And over here, you sort of have to meet secretly, and this is just ridiculous.
So we can't tell you who it is.
But there is
there's
a
work
lab
going
working in
on now.
conjunction with you building such equipment.
They did another interesting thing with this. You always hear of psychic healers and the laying on of hands.
Yes.
And they have psychic healers in Russia. One is Colonel Krivorotov, and his son is a doctor, and he was an Army colonel. And they sort of work as a team. The son does the regular medical part, and he does the laying on of hands part. And they photographed him. They have published articles on this, and they claim that when he was in the process of healing, this energy seemed to focus from his hands, sort of like a laser beam, and went to the aura or surround, whatever you want to call it, of the patient, rather like an energy transfusion.
And now they have equipment which monitors the input of energy on the patient's body so that you can tell whether or not anything really happened, whether or not the person is a charlatan, he's just going up waving his hands and saying, now you're cured. And when nothing at all has happened, you can then determine which people are really accomplishing something and which are not.
Is this widely used in the Russias?
Well, the intriguing thing about this, and it does go into a whole new area of medicine, is that these flares that we've shown you in these photographs come from specific points on the body which were charted 6,000 years ago by Chinese medicine. And this medicine was called acupuncture. And for all these years they said, what nonsense, there's simply nothing there. And when they discovered this form of photography, to their astonishment, they began to see this circulation of energy which the Chinese had postulated. Well, it's a question how the Chinese knew about it so many thousands of years ago.
They must have had some psychics who saw auras.
It's
entirely possible. But acupuncture as a medical technique has been brought into the modern age in Russia and is very, very widely used. And this technique is tied in with it because as soon as they found the photographs related, they had a ready-made system of diagnosis because, you see, the points from which these flares come were known in Chinese medicine to relate to specific points of internal organs. So then they knew, again, you see, where the flare was coming from. And it was like a coded system, almost like a computer bank, And, they had made a really big breakthrough in tracking this down and understanding it.
The color and the action of the flares gives you the reading on what the ailment
deep
is.
in the brain or deep in the
Do that
pancreas.
word for me again, if you will, Sheila.
Acupuncture.
How do you spell it?
Acupuncture.
It's another example, I think, of the Russians being very open-minded. Of course, they are an Asiatic country, too, which we tend to forget.
Yes, there's a whole Oriental section of Russia.
They teach acupuncture in medical schools. They write books about it, and over here it's considered, I'm sure, the worst kind of charlatanry, but they're really looking into it.
And, of course, the old treatment utilized needles, they said, to try to change the flow of this energy. But now they've been able to utilize negative ion fields and heal wounds almost instantaneously by applying negative ions. But it all ties in with this. It seems that this energy picks up the influx of ions and rebuilds.
Come back to my question again, Sheila. I asked if this were widely used in Russia. Is it?
Well, acupuncture is.
Acupuncture is very widely used, and the new techniques they've devised that tie in with this. For instance, they've developed a new instrument called the toboscope, which was based on this research also. That was displayed at Expo 67 as one of the great accomplishments of the Soviet Union.
Called what?
It's called a toboscope. And
toboscope?
Yes, and this instrument locates these points on the body. And they had a display right next to the Vostok and all their other great accomplishments as one of their scientific discoveries. So they are very proud of this work.
Have you got one of those in your secret lab?
Well, no. They export them, and I think they're available.
Fascinating.
We were quite surprised with acupuncture because when we first got there, they kept telling us about Chinese holes, and we thought there's a translation gap here somewhere. Finally understood that it was acupuncture, something we'd really known very little about until we got into this.
You've got some other pictures there. Are they ones that we should see?
Oh, I think we showed most of them. This one is simply of Karl Nikolaev, who was probably the Soviet Union's most tested telepathist. Karl really is an interesting man in the sense that he never had any strange experiences. He never knew that he had ESP. He simply decided to become telepathic at about age 19, and he practiced, and now he's been tested on every sort of test. And his idea, as he told us, was they've now proved that I can do it, and that means if I can learn, you can learn, or at least some other people can learn. It's this, again, idea that probably everybody has this ability. If they practice, if they train. He works with a man called Yuri Kaminsky, who's a biochemist, who is his telepathic sender. And the Russians try to get the two people in a telepathy experiment in rapport. They think the sender is very important. Generally in the West, the sender has sort of been anybody standing around the laboratory who felt like trying to send a message. But in Russia, he's considered a telepathist too. I guess we've shown the rest of these.
You two gals are beautifully educated, well-traveled, informed, and now authorities on psychic discoveries behind the Iron Curtain. What about your own efforts at this? Surely you must have been led to experiment a bit with your own talent.
Yes, actually, by the time the Soviets had shown us how they'd been able to train people to do some of these things, we thought, well, it would be worthwhile to try out some of their techniques. So we created some of these things and attempted them, and we found that with practice, you really can begin to develop ESP and improve it.
How has yours displayed itself, Sheila?
Well, we've learned sort of to send messages back and forth or to identify a picture that somebody else is looking at.
We don't do it on television.
No.
If one of you is looking at a picture, the other one may, at some distance, be able to identify what the subject matter is. That
yes,
kind of
generally, you know, the gist of the design or the colors.
It's actually a lot of fun because you begin to see how the mind associates. One night, Sheila was trying to send me a picture of a $sign, which is a great symbol, and I kept getting
and very appropriate for this book, by the way.
I hope so. And I kept getting a swan with a snorkel on its head, which is really a shape of a $sign. But I had no idea exactly what she was sending me, but I was getting a shape. It's been a lot of fun.
Which of you is the better sender?
I think you are, probably. I don't know.
It's hard to say.
We sort of were taking turns.
Yeah.
I think one thing we wanted to say quickly about Dr. Eisenbud, when we were in the Soviet countries, all the countries over there, they were so fascinated with Ted Serios. This is the American work I think they admire the most. This is very high-level work, and they were very interested in Denver and in Ted and in Dr. Eisenbud. And I think really he's made some tremendous contributions in this country. Probably some of the best work going.
Yes, there's no question about that, and that is certainly recommended reading. The World of Ted Serios by Dr. Jule Eisenbud. If you haven't seen that, it's well worth looking up, and it's available in the paperbacks. And the paperbacks happily have the mental photographs that Ted what do we say? I was going to say telecast, and that isn't right, because that's something we're doing right now instead.
Well, another thing that we might conclude with, the thing that struck us most about this work after seeing the whole range of work they had done in these communist countries is we could sum it up in 3 words: image, energy, potential. What is really coming out as the overall picture from all this work is a whole new image of the nature of human beings as creatures who really do possess extraordinary powers. And the second thing, that there seems to be perhaps new forms of energy that we may be able to tap and utilize right now. And the third thing, that we may be able to find entirely new techniques for developing the potentials that we have. And that all of these things, if we could use them to solve some of our problems. The Soviets say we only use about 10% of our mind power, and if we could even tap a small additional part, we might be able to solve a great many problems in the world today.
Knowing what you know, Lynn Schroeder, what would you wish would happen in the United States in this regard?
I wish that we would get into it. I wish people would not be so embarrassed about it. I wish we'd sort of be as open-minded as the Soviets. And one thing they asked us, it was funny, all the time, they said, tell America that these powers must be used for good. They must not be used as a biological weapon. And this was repeated all over the communist world. So I hope we use them for good and they use them for good.
Well, the sadness is that as we develop scientific powers in a great many directions, it's only obvious to say that these things have been perverted to the uses of warfare. And let us hope that this exploration into the psychic will somehow make warfare unthinkable as we pioneer further in this field.
Certainly hope that.
Very exciting, these two ladies, as I think you'll agree. Sheila Ostrander, very good to have you here.
It's been a pleasure.
Lynn
It's been
Schroeder.
a great pleasure.
Look for their books, a book by Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder called Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. And you'll be lucky if you can find one, because it's been selling out just as rapidly as it showed up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's been a
Next Sunday's hot topic is called impeachment. There's been a lot of talk about recalling people from office and impeachment, of course. And we're going to have a panel of authorities to discuss how this works in actual cold legality and what's happened in history on it. So, till next Sunday and that hot topic, God bless.